Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Good morning, afternoon, evening, based on where you're joining from. Thank you for our first webinar for the Asia Pacific stakeholders, advancing high integrity carbon markets in Asia Pacific, brought to you by the Climate Action Reserve, not-for-profit standard setter with over 25 years of experience in compliance and voluntary carbon markets. And we are bringing this decades of experience to Asia Pacific, this ever-evolving and dynamic region. Like I said, this is the first in a series of webinars that we are organizing for our Asia Pacific folks. So today we will cover on a high level about Climate Action Reserve, our work, our protocols, etc. But in the future sessions, we'll deep dive more into specific topics. It could be our protocols that are most relevant for this region. It could be Article 6 policies. It could be various other topics. So if you have suggestions, please do feel free to write to us, and an email address, my email address will be presented on screen towards the end of this presentation. And we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions during the course of the presentation as well, please drop them in the chat, and I would get to them towards the end of the presentation as well. But also, I highly encourage you to email us for any questions, concerns, feedback, and we will do our best to respond to you as soon as we can. So with that, let us get started. What we have on agenda today is an overview of Climate Action Reserve. What is this organization? I'm sure most of you are familiar, but just also kind of providing you a little bit of context about us, our background, and the work that we are doing across the world, as well as specifically for Asia Pacific. Our roots are in the compliance market, so we'll talk about what that is and how we are bringing that expertise to both compliance and voluntary markets across the world. We'll talk about our approach to GHG account standardization. This is slightly different from what you would have seen with other standards that you're familiar with. So we'll talk about what are the benefits of that approach. We'll talk about protocols in general. These could be compared to methodologies, but there are in other programs that you're familiar with, but there are also key differences that we'll talk about. Our project development process and timelines and updates from Asia Pacific, and finally, ways to stay connected and engaged. Why Asia Pacific even matters? Why are we here talking about this region? I'm sure you would all echo the sentiment that the center of attention, center of gravity for climate action is slowly starting to shift towards Asia Pacific. There are many reasons for that. Asia Pacific is simultaneously responsible for more than 50% of global emissions and greater than 50% of global GDP. But at the same time, it is also highly vulnerable to the devastating impacts of climate change. Governments in recognition for that in the region are strengthening their NDCs, aligning it with 1.5-degree pathways. What it is resulting in is emergence of a range of regulatory mechanisms across the region, some of which are on the screen here. So as you can see, established regulatory mechanisms such as the Singapore carbon tax, to ETS mechanisms in China, South Korea, to our expanding CCTS mechanism in India, to ETS in Indonesia, carbon tax coming up in Malaysia, to upcoming ETS in Turkey, and a range of Article 6 approaches. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. It doesn't cover, it's not meant to be exhaustive, but I'm sure you get the idea in terms of why this region is becoming more and more important. And one of the things that we've noted through conversation with governments across this region is one emerging common thread is the need for locally appropriate solutions that align with these developing regulatory frameworks while also maintaining credit quality and integrity. When we talk about integrity, what does it mean specifically for market stakeholders? It refers to robust additionality and conservative baselines, strong MRV requirements, clear permanence provisions, and alignment with jurisdictional frameworks. Credits that are designed to meet quasi-compliance or compliance mechanisms such as CORSIA are often perceived to be of high quality or high integrity. The bottom line is that these market dynamics underscore why rigorous, transparent, and policy-aligned crediting frameworks are gaining momentum when it comes to supporting national climate action. And this is where Climate Action Reserve comes in. So a little bit about us. Climate Action Reserve is a not-for-profit standard setter. We have more than 25 years of experience in both voluntary and compliance carbon markets. While our roots are in the compliance markets in North America, we've been using that experience to kind of work with a range of governments across jurisdictions in Asia, Latin America, and of course, North America to help them advance their climate targets. To date, we have issued more than 250 million tons of carbon credits, which in our program are known as climate reserve tons or CRTs. These are issued to a range of protocols that are used across the world. In the compliance market, we work directly in California, Cap and Trade program, Washington's program, a range of carbon tax where our program is eligible. A program is, of course, called CORSIA eligible. It is CCP eligible as well, with 8 protocols already CCP approved. And we have MOUs with a range of governments to help them support in development of effective national carbon markets. What do we do as a standard setter? I'm sure you're familiar with the role of a standard setter, so I wouldn't go too much into details of that. But just on a high level, we develop high quality standards, programs for GHG removals and reductions. We oversee the listing, verification, and registration of projects. We issue CRTs in our program, carbon credits, as I mentioned. And we maintain a transparent and public registry for tracking issuance, transfer, and retirement of credits. But more importantly, we also create tools, guidance, resources, and trainings for a range of stakeholders to help them implement our program effectively. These are the 5 integrity criteria in our program. I'm sure you're familiar with these as well through your work, either with the reserve or through a range of other standards. But just I'll touch upon some of them really quickly. First of all, additionality. There are 2 additionality tests in our program. One is the legal requirement test, which means that projects have to demonstrate how they exceed local laws and regulatory requirements, and performance standard test, where they must exceed the most likely business as usual scenario. Verifiable, as you know, there are standardized eligibility criteria and quantification methodologies, and these projects' activities will be verified by independent third parties. Emission reductions need to be real, so emission reductions are calculated based on either direct metering or measuring of project activities to generate a conservative calculation of emission reductions or removals. They need to be permanent. I'm sure you're aware how vigorously discussed and debated this topic is currently in the industry, and we make sure that it is adequately represented in our program as well, meaning any leakage, loss, or reversal risk is quantified and compensated. And finally, there needs to be clear accountability and ownership to ensure compliance with the program requirements. This is a map of what the program, where these protocols are currently applicable. So as I've mentioned, these 250 million tons of CRTs are issued to around 1,100 project activities across the world. This is just another sort of perspective on where those 250 million tons of credits are coming from. So we have a range of different protocols to which these credits are issued. As you can see, forestry protocols have issued the highest number of credits, which sort of signifies the importance of nature-based solutions in meeting climate targets. But there are also a range of others. As you can see, there is industrial gases, there's waste management, landfill, livestock projects, and a range of other new innovative methodologies or protocols emerging, such as biochar and soil enrichment. This is looking at that 250 million credits from the CORSIA and ICVCM eligibility lens. So out of those 250 million credits, 33 million are CCP eligible under ICVCM's program, and 1 million are CORSIA eligible. This 33 million represents a significant share of the market, around 30% of the total CCP eligible credits out in the market. So bottom line is these reserve credits represent a significant share of CCP and CORSIA eligible credits. And this number will continue to grow as more of our protocols become CCP approved and a program completes its eligibility for the second compliance period under CORSIA. I've talked a little bit, already alluded to our compliance market expertise. So let me give it a little bit more flavor here. Like I said, we've worked, obviously, our roots are in the California compliance market as well as Washington, but we have expanded our reach to work with governments across a range of different jurisdictions, including subnational programs in Querétaro and Colima in Mexico, where a program is eligible to offset up to 20% and 50% of carbon tax liable emissions, respectively. Pending approval, we hope we'll also be able to, our program will also be eligible within Singapore's carbon tax. Similarly, with Chile, pending approval, a program would be eligible within that jurisdictions. And we also work with a range of governments through MOUs to help support technical development, capacity building, etc., to successfully build support in the development of the national carbon markets. Why this is important to our Asia Pacific region, because as governments increasingly engage with carbon markets, this experience becomes directly relevant to developing effective domestic markets as well as Article 6 cooperative pathways. I have also alluded to our approach to GHG accounting standardization, and this is slightly different from different programs that you may be familiar with. So let me talk a little bit about what it is and why is it relevant. In simple terms, standardization is the bedrock of our program. What it means is that instead of relying on project-specific assessments, a program uses standardized methods to determine project eligibility, additionality, baseline, etc. This incorporates the local laws, norms, and conditions of a specific country, a specific jurisdiction within which a protocol will be applied. Quantification of GHG reductions or removals happens through a baseline, which is established under certain assumptions, emission factors, and monitoring methods. Why the standardization is important, as you can probably guess, this minimizes subjectivity as well as personal judgment in project assessment. For developers and project developers and investors, this reduces transaction costs. It provides a clear path. Once a project is approved and verified under these standardized rules, its transparency is guaranteed, which helps build investor confidence as well. We've spoken a little bit about the reserve, it's the program itself, the processes. I'll shift gears a little bit to talk about protocols. As I mentioned, these could be comparable to, as we understand, methodologies in other programs, but there are also a few key differences which I'll try to highlight. First of all, the protocol development process itself, what makes it rigorous, inclusive, and transparent? First of all, it starts with local engagement, where we always strive to reach out to critical local stakeholders in the region, including governments, environmental organizations, potential project developers, to ensure we appropriately account for the local legal framework or other key considerations, such as social safeguards, land tenure rights, etc. This is followed by a technical review of the draft protocol, which again ideally includes local stakeholders. Then there is a public comment period, followed by which the protocol is adopted formally by the Board of Directors of Climate Action Reserve. We actively invite industry experts, environmental organizations, state agencies, local bodies to participate in this entire process. And even if you are not part of a formal working group that might have been created for a particular protocol development, if you're interested, please do write to us and we can definitely include you as observers during this process. This is a map of our currently active protocol jurisdictions. As I have explained, we have protocols active across North America, Asia and Latin America, but this graph will continuously, this illustration will continuously change as we bring more protocols to other parts of the world and specifically to Asia Pacific. And in that sort of thread, it's also important to mention, how do we do that? How do we bring new protocols or adapt existing protocols for the jurisdictions that are important to us? A unique principle that we abide by is that we don't believe that there is a one-size-fits-all solution to addressing climate action or climate change, because every jurisdiction, every region is different. It has very specific local considerations, norms, which need to be accounted for the protocol to be relevant to that particular region. And therefore, our protocols are developed for each jurisdiction specifically in a way that it aligns with local policies, laws, and norms. And some examples of how we do that is, first of all, we assess baseline assumptions and common practices for that jurisdiction. We assess legal requirements and relevant laws for regulatory compliance. We build standardized additionality tests. We adapt safeguards to the local context. We assess land tenure documentation. We build in consideration for local communities. Where possible, we also form local work groups that will help us engage with the local stakeholders to understand their considerations better, that can be reflected in the protocol, and then ensure documentation and communications are in appropriate language. Local stakeholder engagement is central to the work that we do to make sure our protocol remains consistent with local laws and is relevant to local conditions. What this results in is protocols that will not be general, say, a forestry protocol or a biochar protocol. Instead, what they result in is, say, a forestry protocol for Mexico, or a biochar protocol for India, or a soil enrichment protocol for US, etc. As you can see, these are the protocols that have been developed specifically for specific jurisdictions. So we have biochar in US and Canada, we have forestry in Mexico and Panama, to landfill in Argentina, to nitric acid production in US and India. But like I said, this is just sort of where we are right now, but we want to expand this to other jurisdictions. And on that note, we want to also talk about a very exciting new approach, which is the modular approach to protocol development. What this means is this is our approach to streamlining the entire protocol development process, which will allow us to bring protocols to new jurisdiction within a couple of months. So currently, for us to be able to adapt a protocol, an existing protocol, takes us typically 4 to 6 months, and a new protocol development could take about a year. I mean, of course, there are a lot of different kind of considerations and variables within that, but I think historically that's what we have seen. But with the modular approach, we would be able to launch a protocol in a jurisdiction in just a couple of months. How would we be able to do that? First of all, the modular approach would allow us to kind of reduce the timeline, especially where there are limited changes to the quantification and eligibility criteria between jurisdictions. Local stakeholder engagement will still remain central to our process, but we'll standardize specific criteria per jurisdiction, and assessment will be focused on key considerations for the jurisdiction. Why is it valuable for stakeholders, particularly across APAC as well? It reduces operational costs. It lowers transaction costs for developers that may be operating across multiple regions. It, of course, ensures faster market readiness and availability of high integrity credits for both governments and buyers. And it enables rapid expansion to regions where there is a need for specific sort of protocols without compromising on environmental integrity. So now a quick snapshot of a project development process. And here as well, there are key differences, so which I will take you through. You may also be familiar with what this looks like for programs. So you basically open an account, complete the KYC process. Then there's submittal and project listing, followed by project monitoring and quantifying its reductions and removals. And then there is verification by third party and credit issuance, followed by the transaction of credits that, of course, happens outside registry. Credits verification as well as issuance happens after the documentation is reviewed by reserve staff. But you'll notice that validation as a step is missing here. And the reason for that is because we have standardized process and criteria where we have built in a lot of these considerations already in specific protocols through project eligibility or conservative baselines or additionality. It does away with the need to have an extra validation step, which also is important because it reduces the transaction costs for the project developers without compromising on environmental integrity of the credits. This has also helped us keep our review timelines fairly short. And one of our key strengths is that we have industry-leading review timelines. Our review times are currently amongst the world's fastest. The average time from the submittal to registration and issuance is only 48 calendar days. In 2025, the average time to initially process projects was only 15 calendar days. The average time for secondary and tertiary reviews, where it was needed, was under 5 calendar days. And Reserve sent responses within 10 business days of project and verification documents being submitted for final review. While we really pride ourselves on these timelines, we continually strive and assess our processes to see how we can maintain and even reduce these timelines further while maintaining the highest rigor in our reviews, because we understand predictability in timing is critical for project developers as well as buyers. And now some quick updates from our own region. What protocols do we have active and where are the opportunities for all of you to engage with us? As I had mentioned, we have an India nitric acid production protocol that is currently under development. Briefly about the protocol, it addresses GHG emission reductions from nitric acid production. It focuses on controlling N2O emissions through installation or use of N2O abatement technologies. And this protocol is also being developed through a multi-stakeholder consultation process. Because the protocols are jurisdiction specific, this protocol specifically applies to project activities within India. If you'd like to engage with us on this protocol, there are various opportunities. You can write to us if you can help us in identifying and incorporating relevant laws and norms, in sharing industry-specific conditions in India. And of course, once it goes to public consultation, you're more than free to provide your comments during that period as well. The second is a China adipic acid production protocol. This is an active protocol, and I must mention it is CCP-approved protocol. It addresses GHG emission reductions from adipic acid production. It focuses again on N2O emission abatement through the installation of N2O abatement technologies and has been developed through a multi-stakeholder consultation process. Of course, there are opportunities to engage here as well. For governments, they can use the credits from this protocol within the Article 6 cooperative approaches. Plant operators can use this to quantify and verify N2O abatement using an internationally recognized and CCP-approved protocol. And of course, buyers have access to CCP-approved credits once they're issued in this protocol. And then we are almost coming to the end of our session. So I think I've got 3 more slides. So this is just summarizing why Climate Action Reserve, what are the benefits? First of all, like I said, we have a combination of compliance and voluntary market experience, which allows us to work across the spectrum of different market participants. We have a process for standardized protocol development, which reduces the time to the market for a protocol, but at the same time, without compromising on integrity of these protocols. We ensure jurisdictional alignment with national climate priorities, which reduces policy risks. We have expeditious project review timelines, and we continuously strive to improve them even further. We have a pioneering multi-stakeholder support. So if you have questions, concerns, issues, you write to us, and we will make sure that we get back to you as soon as we can. And then while we do not directly get involved in the pricing or the demand side of credits, I would be remiss not to mention here that our credits, or CRTs as they're called, have consistently ranked amongst the highest valued offset credits since their first appearance on the carbon market. Why am I reiterating all of this again? Because this is important for Asia Pacific. Governments in this region are increasingly getting involved in carbon markets through building domestic carbon markets, through integration of independent crediting programs and Article 6 cooperative pathways. Our protocols, because they are jurisdictionally aligned, they complement and do not compete or run parallel to national efforts. And project developers, this entire mechanism allows project developers an opportunity to maximize the value of credits. And if you've stuck around, I would just provide some ways in which you can engage with us. If you're a project developer, like I said, I think a priority for 2026 and beyond is to identify new protocol opportunities for specific countries within Asia Pacific. And Asia Pacific in general as well. So if you have thoughts about which sectors we should look into for protocol development across specific regions in Asia Pacific, or if you have concept notes even, please feel free to share with them, and we would build that into our protocol prioritization process. You can provide technical inputs to the development or adaptation of high integrity protocols. You can participate in stakeholder consultation process. If you're a government, we would really value your inputs to ensure our protocols align with domestic regulations, safeguards, and policy objectives. We'd really appreciate if you could respond to us when we reach out to you, because we do want to ensure that our protocols are consistent with national policies. There will be opportunities for capacity building, training, etc., that we'd be happy to work together with you. And then, of course, we have an established registry and carbon market infrastructure, which can support and accelerate national indices and climate targets. And if you're a buyer, of course, engaged with us, we can talk more about how we ensure credit quality, permanence, additionality. One unique feature is that we have a carbon market directory to facilitate connections between reserve project developers and other stakeholders. So feel free to sign into that. And very exciting update is that we have the North American Carbon World, our event coming up end of March 2026. So if you're interested in joining that, please feel free to write to us as well. And finally, beyond this webinar, how do we stay connected? So, of course, browse through content on the website, sign up for the monthly newsletter. Like I said, we will be happy to host a series of webinars for APAC stakeholders. So if you have ideas or thoughts, just write to us. And we also provide technical inputs on emerging national regulations. Join us at a range of events. Feel free to meet us there. We are present at most of the high impact events. And then, of course, North America Carbon World coming up. So yeah, that's kind of everything. That's a wrap from today's session. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for your time. I can stay on for a couple of minutes to see if there are any questions. But yeah, thank you very much. All right, it looks like we don't have any questions, but like I said, feel free to get in touch with us, email us if you have any questions, and we'll make sure to respond to you. So thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.